Minnesota is located right here in the Midwestern part of the United States. Minnesota has the 4 seasons of fall, winter, spring, and summer. All of these seasons technically last for about 3 months. However, most Minnesotans would agree that winter is our longest season by far. I'll start by explaining fall. Fall usually begins in the start of September and goes to the end of November, or the middle of November, depending on the year. During the fall time, all of the leaves start changing to different colors of like red and orange and yellow, and they look really, really pretty. And then the leaves start to fall to the ground to get ready for the winter time. The winter time usually begins in the middle of November or the end of November, and it goes till about the end of March, sometimes even later if we're very unlucky. It is our longest season of the year, and it is the one that Minnesotans complain about the most. Usually when the snow first comes, everyone's very excited because it means Christmas time and the holiday spirit, but by the end of the winter time, people are done with the slush and the cold weather. Usually it's about anywhere from 30 degrees to negative 30 degrees, and there can be anywhere from 7 feet of snow on the ground to no feet of snow on the ground, just depending on if it's melted or not. Then after winter comes spring, and spring usually begins at the end of March, and it goes till the start of May. And during the spring, it's really rainy and very slushy, and there's a lot of mud. And it doesn't always look like that picture that I put up there, but if we're lucky, it does. Sometimes it looks that pretty. But that's when our flowers start blooming, and the leaves start coming back on the trees, and the birds come back. So it's a really nice time. And then after the spring comes the summertime. And the summertime usually goes from about the end of May until the end of August. And Minnesotans really like to spend their time on the lake because we have so many of them here. And it can be anywhere from like 70 degrees to over 100 degrees. So there's a big range in temperature, but it's very nice and we like to enjoy the sun. So yeah. Here in Minnesota, we are known for a ton of different things. One of the things that we are most known for is our hockey. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, right here, you can see a picture of our professional states hockey team. They're called the Minnesota Wild playing. And hockey is a huge thing in Minnesota because winter stays around for a very long time and people are bored, so they want something to do. So what they do is they grab a stick and they grab a puck and they go onto the frozen lakes, or they go into a hockey rink and they play some hockey. And we're actually kind of proud of our hockey because most of our colleges play it and they're quite good at it, and it's a very physical sport. I don't know if you guys have ever seen hockey before, but I don't know how to explain it. They are like pushing each other up into the walls and all over the ground, and it's really fun to watch too. And it's actually one of the only professional sports where the referees allow fights on the rink, so it's kind of fun to watch. Another thing that we're known for is our state bird, and it's called the loon, and you can see a picture of it right there around my circle. And if you look to the right at the next picture, right here, it's a picture of Lake Minnetonka actually, and that is our biggest lake in Minnesota. But we have a lot more than just one big lake. We have actually over 10,000 lakes. And this is really neat about Minnesota because you can't really drive more than a half an hour without running into some sort of a lake. And if you just go like a little bit south into our neighboring state of Iowa, they're quite different from us because they only have one really big lake and a couple of small lakes. So Minnesota's kind of unique for that. Another thing we have here is our wild rice, and it was one of our native grains to Minnesota, so we make wild rice soup with it, and it's actually quite delicious. Another thing that we have here in Minnesota is the monarch butterfly, as you can see right there, and the reason that's so unique is that during the winter time, the butterflies travel from Minnesota all the way down to Mexico for a very long, I don't know how many miles, but it's a really long trip, and people kind of make like a sport of it, And what they do is they put little tags on their monarch butterflies so they can kind of track to see how far they made it and if they made it to Mexico or not. Another thing here in Minnesota that we're known for is our dairy. We have a lot of dairy farms because we're really big into like our yogurt and our cheese and our milk, and we actually have like a Miss Dairy pageant of Minnesota just because we're so into dairy. And the winner of the pageant, actually, she gets a statue of herself carved out of butter. So that's kind of funny. Okay, so I'm just going to explain a little bit more about our farms in Minnesota just because they're such a huge thing in our industry. There are over 81,000 farms in Minnesota, and 26.9 million of acres of farmland is in Minnesota. And that means there's about, one half of our total land in Minnesota is just farmland. Corn and soybeans are the state's top producing crops, and cattle, pig, and goats are the most common to be on farms. What some farmers like to do is something that is called showing their animals, and that is when they show their livestock, which is like their pigs or their goats or their sheep, and they bring them to judges, and the judges look at them and judge them based on certain characteristics of their breeds. And the farmers who show their animals spend hours and hours getting them ready for the judges, and they can win a ton of money just depending on how good their animal is. Another thing that is important to Minnesota is our Mall of America, or also known as MOA as an abbreviation. It is located 1.5 miles from the airport, so it's a huge tourist attraction. It has over 400 stores, an amusement park, underwater world, and Lego world all stuffed inside. And it also generates about $2 billion a year. Parks, camping, and the Boundary Waters. In Minnesota, there are over 67 state parks with trails and recreational areas. In these parks, there is no hunting and there is no hurting the land. We try to do everything we can to preserve our land and keep it how nature intended it to be. One fun thing to do while in Minnesota is to go camping. Camping is when you set up a tent in the woods, roast marshmallows, and enjoy the outdoors. You even have bonfires sometimes. And when you have a bonfire, you always have to make a s'more. If you look over at the bottom right of the screen, you can see what a s'more is. It is a marshmallow and a chocolate piece stuffed between 2 graham crackers. But the marshmallow has been roasted over the fire, so it has like a gooey, squishy, delicious inside. Also, another really fun thing to do in Minnesota is to go canoeing. We have a lot of lakes in Minnesota and a lot of little rivers, so you can just take a canoe and paddle and relax the day away. Another thing that's fun to do in Minnesota is to take a trip to the Boundary Waters. The Boundary Waters are in the upper part of Minnesota, and there is no cell phone reception and there is no internet, and when you go up there, it's just you and nature. So it's actually really fun. It just kind of gets you away from everything for a day. And the stars up there are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I took a trip there this past summer, and I was there for a week, and I don't think I've ever seen so many stars. It was really amazing. And I was there for about a week, and every day you would just wake up with the sunrise, and you would go swimming, and you would go fishing, and you would explore around the nature. And in the Boundary Waters, there are no buildings, there are no airplanes, there aren't even motorboats in some spots just because they're so dedicated to preserving the land. And there are a lot of wild animals out there. Sometimes you'd maybe see a moose or a bear. Thank goodness I never saw any, otherwise I'd be pretty scared, but it's not uncommon because you're out there with the nature, and it's a really fun time. Believe it or not, Minnesota isn't all just nature and wildlife. We also have some urban areas. Our 2 twin cities are called Minneapolis and St. Paul, and the reason that we also call them the Twin Cities is because they are right next to each other. Minneapolis is the biggest city in Minnesota with a population of about 400,000 people, and it is 58.4 square miles, or 151 square kilometers. St. Paul is our state capital and is slightly smaller than Minneapolis, but it's right next to it. It has a population of about 300,000, and it is 56.18 square miles, or 145.51 square kilometers. There are many stereotypes and silly sayings that people associate with Minnesotans. Some of them are true, some of them not so much. One of the first things that people associate with Minnesotans is a funny sounding accent. They say that we like to elongate our O's and kind of make our I's sound like a E. So when we say Minnesota, it's like Minnesota instead of Minnesota. But that's what some people like to say. Minnesota is also known as Minnesota Nice. The reason for this is because when people travel here from different states, they just say that everyone from Minnesota is so nice. And I guess so, because everyone around here seems pretty nice, but so we have a lot of t-shirts that say Minnesota Nice, so if you ever see one of those, that's what it's referring to, just the nice people in Minnesota. One stereotype about Minnesota is that we live in the tundra and we get like 20 feet of snow in the winter. It is kind of true that we exaggerate about our snow, but we don't get 20 feet. We do get a lot of snow though. But if you look in the picture in the top middle, right here, that's not an actual picture of Minnesota. That's kind of just a funny one made up. And if you look down here, that's also not one of Minnesota. But that's what people tend to think when they think of Minnesota. But we really don't get that much snow. Many people from Scandinavia came over to Minnesota, and they brought many of their silly sayings with them. Some of them are oofda, ya sure, ya betcha, and don't you know. I'm not really sure what all of them mean, but we just kind of say them because I think they've been ingrained into our culture. Another thing that people associate with Minnesotans are the fuzzy lumberjack hats. I mean, we do wear them some of the times, but not everybody. They're really warm though, and they keep us warm from the cold winters. Hopefully you learned a lot about this presentation about Minnesota, and if you ever visit here, now you'll know what to expect.